There once was a mouse who sat in his house, counting on profit and PR. Then along came a spider, and the audience grew wiser and blew down the mouse's house of cards. As I recited a famous line in another recent video of mine, all the world's a stage. Nothing holds more true than sometimes in Hollywood media. And today we're going to examine the reality of what went on at the box office this year. You see, the Walt Disney Company may be sitting on some wonderful PR. Biggest box office opening weekend ever of Labor Day. Biggest opening domestic haul of a post-pandemic era film. All these things sound great on the surface. But in reality, math, well, it's a stubborn thing. You see, math is the end-all be-all. Financials, data, dollars. Things that actually matter for a company that's not only publicly traded, but also trying to make a profit. You see, this is one of the things that we try to examine here, putting Hollywood through the business and financial lens. I don't care about the puff pieces and the great PR. Sometimes the stories are warranted. Sometimes it's great to read. Sometimes it's a nice mile marker to look at a film and say, hey, it did great compared to other films. That all may be well and good. But at the end of the day, the one thing that none of that has anything to do with is, did a movie actually make money? Well, the Walt Disney Company may have been at the top of the charts this year in the box office in terms of total haul. But what happens if we actually put the reality lens of financial data to it? What did they actually turn in the way of profit? It's not good. Here we go. Renegade Online. Welcome back. Another great day here, and Happy New Year from Valiant Renegade once again. This is the first regular video that we're going to do kind of on the box office topic for this year. If you haven't seen the actual first video of 2022, it was a great conversation I had, as always, with my good friend Cameron Pasha. Please go back and check that one out. Talking a little bit about some of the news with Boba Fett and things like that, Disney Plus, kind of tearing apart some of the numbers, talking about it from a Hollywood perspective, also on the writing side, the audience reaction side, and of course the financial and data side. So make sure you check that one out. But today, we're going to talk about this right here on the screen. We're going to talk about what the 2021 box office looked like for Disney in reality. We're not just going to talk about a lot of the news articles and some of the puff pieces that we have seen ad nauseum throughout this year at how they had a Marvel movie that was directed by an Oscar winner, or that they had a representation movie that broke records on a Labor Day weekend. All of that is well and good. If you enjoyed these films, I applaud you. That's fine. I am not here to take that away from you. Rarely, if ever, do we really get into a lot of actual content reviews and writing reviews on this channel. There's plenty of other amazing YouTube channels out there that do a great job of this. I leave it to them to kind of handle that unless it's something I really enjoy. Like Cobra Kai and Cobra Kai Season 4. I loved it. I freaking loved it. Squid Game, good stuff. I'll talk about that from time to time if there's something out there that I really enjoyed. But as far as this is concerned, I try to stick to the financials and the data. I understand that that may upset some people when we kind of push past a lot of the fog that comes from the Hollywood media hype about some of these movies, especially from a studio as large, as powerful, frankly, as rich as Disney is. They can control a lot of media narrative out there. And I would try to, let's just say, impart that information to you as best I can, to always take things with a grain of salt that you read in places like Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and yes, even places like Deadline that we often cite here on this channel. So before I get into it, I just want to say I thank everyone so much. We are almost at a 1-year anniversary, just a little under a month away. and we are over 3,000 subscribers. An amazing feat as far as I can tell for a YouTube channel, a new YouTube channel, and a new YouTuber coming in from scratch. So thank you all so much for your vote of confidence, your faith, and your enjoyment of all these videos that we put out. We really try to stick to the facts as best we can, but as may happen from time to time, we get into the editorial side and we try to make it as obvious as possible when we do that. So that being said, let's dig in, as I'm sure you're all staring at this graph right now, wondering what all these brilliant colors and information could actually bear out. Well, as you can see here, this is the list of films that have come out from the Walt Disney Studios and the various Walt Disney Studios, I should say, so far this year in 2021, or at least last year, pardon me. I am still, like most people, it takes me a while to start putting 22 on checks and dates on forms and things like that. I'm still stuck on 2021, so bear with me if I goof up a couple of times during this video. So what we're looking at here is a bar chart and a graph beneath it that is going to give us some valuable data in terms of what did these Disney movies actually do. Now, we're picking on Disney today, and quite frankly, I could make similar charts for other studios like Warner Brothers or Paramount, Universal, Sony, so on and so forth. But the fact remains that Disney has been the king in terms of haul this year, in terms of total releases and box office. But what we have to do, what we always have to do to find out, is all the PR hype or all the numbers and the things that people put out there in the media. Does it actually really mean that Disney made money? That's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get into this, and we're going to go right down the line in chronological order in terms of the movies that Disney has released and talk about each one and then what kind of year that Disney had, because frankly, it doesn't seem to me that the House of Mouse, regardless of what you've read out there, had a very good year at all. So this year, Disney had quite a few big releases come out. And when I say big releases, I'm talking about movies that come with a hefty budget, a hefty price tag, not only in production, but also in global marketing or global P&A, print and advertising, as it were. And the numbers we take here all come from the website, The Numbers. I understand there's sometimes a discrepancy between reported numbers between them and, say, IMDb, or Box Office Pro, which is part of IMDb, rather. And I'll address that as we go through. Of course, some of these movies also had some concurrent Disney Plus releases, which meant they came out on Disney Plus at the same time with a premium video on demand price tag, a PVOD, through Disney Premier Access, typically for $29.95 or $30 US for those of you out there outside of the US watching this video. So down on the bottom most right side of your screen, you'll see the numbers. The finale here is covered up. We'll get to that in just a minute. What I want to do is go through each film individually, talk about the production and marketing budget, talk about the grosses, and explain a few things. You'll see we have a disclaimer down there at the bottom that all the data here that we talk about with revenue and sharing assumes a certain percentage based on industry experts that we trust, people from Deadline that do this research every year for the magazine, that talk about the biggest winners and losers of the box office of the previous year. Haven't seen those numbers come in from Deadline yet. I'm hoping they're going to come back and do a new piece like they did for 2019 and early 2020. We didn't really have one for 2020 itself because of obvious reasons. Theaters were closed. Hoping to get one for 2021, which was a very, very bizarre year for day and date and streaming releases. And in fact, if this video comes out maybe before, maybe after, not really sure yet, I just recorded a video with my good friends over at Force of Light Entertainment. Michelle and I talked about the Warner Brothers day and date concurrent streaming decision that they went with for 2021, the effects that had. So if you want to talk about Warner Brothers or hear some of my thoughts on some of the Warner Brothers and HBO Max stuff, please head over to Force of Light Entertainment. Check that video out. If it's not there by the time you see it, make sure you like and subscribe to them as well. And that video should be up fairly soon, if not already. So let's start down the roll. Raya and the Last Dragon. This came out in the early part of the year. This came out in the part of the year when we could say that there were still a few markets in the U.S., at least local markets, but some of them very big markets, Los Angeles, New York. This was the same problem that movies like Godzilla vs. Kong had when they came out in the theater in March and April, that you did not have access to a good bit of theaters. So Disney at the time made the decision to do the concurrent releases, having it on Premier Access with Disney Plus and also in the theaters. But as it was, Raya and the Last Dragon, like most Disney animation studios, and also like most Pixar studios for that matter, when those movies are made these days, they're coming with price tags on the order of about $150 million. Raya and the Last Dragon was no exception to that rule. You see there the figure 225. Raya and the Last Dragon also would have had, because Disney was trying to push it into theaters, they would have had to have also made the conscious decision they have to advertise this movie to get people to theaters where they could go see them. Now, I assigned Raya and the Last Dragon about a $75 million global P&A. That could be a little bit on the light side. It might also be a little high, but I feel pretty confident because global P&A or marketing figures, unlike production budgets, are much harder to come by. We can gauge them based on what the same studio has done with previous motion picture releases to kind of get an idea of what they spend per picture to advertise to get people to the theaters to go watch it. But we don't always know for sure. So I feel pretty confident in setting this at a $75 million figure. And so that puts the total production and marketing cost at around $225 million. Raya and the Last Dragon had a $54.7 million domestic, $75.56 million international gross, total global box office at $130 million. Now, we can stop right there. You can tell right off the bat, if I look at production and marketing costs, even if I threw out the $75 million of assumed global P&A, you can already tell right there that that movie did not make Disney any money, at least not again at the box office. I understand that they made some revenue from Premier Access, although I don't believe, to the best of what I've been able to find, that Disney has not released those final figures. They did pretty much on one movie, and we'll get to that shortly. But we'll circle back to that at the end, okay? Because it's a worthy discussion, and from a mathematical and financial standpoint, it certainly is something we want to take into account. But for right now, strictly box office, obviously that movie did not make money. I don't even really need to explain that. You can see right there that $130 million in total global gross is certainly less than $225 million. It's also less than the $150 million production budget we know that they assigned to this film. Cruella was the next one. Now, this one is a little bit trickier. Cruella came out, and we had some sources suggesting that it was a $100 million production budget. I have seen other sources suggesting $200 million. Honestly, I don't know which ones to really buy. But again, because it's a Disney movie, and we do know factually, historically, that Disney assigns much larger production budgets to their films than most other studios on average, that what I did was I simply split the difference and I said $150 million production budget to Cruella. If the $200 million production budget is more accurate, which it may well could be, then obviously it would make the gains or losses more exaggerated depending on which way we go, whether it's 100 or 200 million. But for right now, we're going to say it was 100 million with a $75 million, a relatively low ball figure for Disney, $75 million global P&A. We had a total of $233 million in total global box office, again, not including Disney Plus Premier Access. Disney, in fact, reports those revenues under a different financial division of the company than they do theatrical distribution and licensing. That comes in under Disney Plus. Then we had Jungle Cruise. Jungle Cruise had a budget of $200 million, which I can totally believe. Again, it's Disney. This also starred The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. This was a big scale production. Pretty good movie. It was entertaining, but here we are, $300 million in production and global marketing. The $100 million for this movie, honestly, in marketing, might be under the mark. It might be higher than that. To give you an example, we just had Spider-Man No Way Home come out. Deadline put the marketing budget on that movie from Sony itself at $248 million against a $200 million production budget. So again, this is why I say you can't always use necessarily a simple rule of thumb. Sometimes it works for some studios and for some types of movies. Big budget motion pictures, you oftentimes have to throw the rules of thumb out the window, especially in the last 3, 4, 5 years, because marketing costs have accelerated drastically since roughly 2010, 2011. Jungle Cruise at $300 million, $220 million total global box office. Again, not much explanation needed there. We'll keep moving on. Black Widow, $300 million between production and marketing. A $200 million stated production budget, again, assuming roughly $100 million for global P&A. Could have been higher. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the global P&A wasn't closer to 120 to 130. But for right now, we're going to stick with $100 million. That seems to be a decent average from what I have seen from Marvel Cinematic Universe movies for the last several years. In fact, the last time an MCU film had a marketing budget that we know of lower than $100 million was Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which is now 5 years old. Shang-Chi. Now, I know in the most famous video that I've made to date was Shang-Chi was a box office failure. Boy, I got some warm and fuzzy love from so many folks out there for that video. I'm sorry. I'm still correct. You can like Shang-Chi, and that's fine. I don't care. I've seen the movie. It was okay. I was tepid about it at best. There were some things in there that I found entertaining. There were some things in there I didn't. As I stated in that video, which most of the people who downvoted it and then complained about it in comments didn't even watch. I'm a huge Tony Leung fan. The only reason I wanted to see that movie was for him. And for those of you that don't know who that is Shang-Chi's father that's in the film. The man who plays his father, more or less. So again, it's you can say what you want about it. That is irrelevant to the box office success of the film, which, here we go, $250 million. Now, I'm coming in this with a stipulation. The production budget for this film really was about $200 million because that is standard Marvel fare these days. They allegedly received, according to some sources, a $50 million film tax credit from the Australian government for the filming that they did there. What you need to understand about film tax credits is they don't just cut a check overnight like that, generally speaking. Usually film tax credits take some time to materialize, at least fully. So bear that in mind, but I did slate this at a net $150 million production budget, as many sources have discussed. Putting in, again, another $100 million, which I think is totally reasonable for Shang-Chi, because it's a Marvel movie, in global marketing. Remember, Shang-Chi, this was the first movie that Disney went full in on and gave it an exclusive theatrical window. So these movies are going in chronological order. Shang-Chi was given an exclusive 45-day theatrical window. It landed on Disney Plus roughly 2 months to the day after it landed in theaters. Shang-Chi, $250 million all in costs. So they may have even spent more money than $100 million on marketing this film because it was their first of 2021 to have that theatrical exclusive release. It had a total of, now, this is another caveat I want to stipulate. My numbers here have about $418 million in total box office, global box office. Again, this is from the numbers. I understand IMDb has it reported at about $433 million. So there's some discrepancy there or some reporting that's going wrong. I get that. But because I wanted to be consistent in the data, I used everything from the numbers, okay, in terms of box office revenues. So, of course, if it is roughly $17 million higher, that's going to affect the final outcome some. We'll talk about that in a minute because I know some people are going to be a little salty when I show you those last two columns. The Eternals, $300 million all in, 200 production, 100 global P&A. Again, I may be shy on my global P&A. It's at least 100, I'm sure. It's probably more. I wouldn't be surprised if it was on the order of 120, 130, maybe even 140. Global P&A these days is a very expensive endeavor, especially with targeted online digital advertising. Folks, Google does not come cheap for advertising whatsoever. But we had a global haul of $399,485 million again, as I collected this data a couple of days ago. Encanto, $250 million. Now, Encanto came, like Raya and the Last Dragon, with a $150 million production budget price tag. That is typical fare for Disney Animation Studios. Pretty much every film that they've had from Disney Animation Studios in the last several years has come with a roughly $150 million price tag. Again, I gave it another $100 million for global P&A. If you want to assume it's 75 or 60 million and really kind of lowball it, you can do that too. Again, I'm just using what I know to be historical Disney kind of standard fare for movies like this. The global box office to date, 206. Now, what you need to understand about all these films, all these movies right now, with the exception of the Eternals, are done in the theaters and on Disney+. Eternals is still not yet on Disney+. Encanto, everything else is already on Disney+ for free. No extra charge. Eternals hits Disney+ about a week from the date that I'm recording this. So my point is that theatrical box office runs are completed. They're done. They're over. So let's now talk about this. Go down to the bottom there. As you can see there, data assumes that box office rentals, revenue sharing, at industry averages published in previous research reports by Deadline magazine. Domestic net at 55% of gross. So for every dollar in gross revenues that it earned at a theater in domestic run, North America, Canada, and US, the studio, Disney in this case, got to take home about 55%. The rest of it stayed basically at the theater chain. International, at 43%. The reason for that, and again, this is Deadline's numbers, not mine. This is the numbers, these are the figures Deadline's experts have used for years to do their data research. The reason why it's much lower, some international markets have laws that state that the theaters have to retain so much. There's also things like foreign taxes, foreign withholding taxes. Think about Great Britain, where you have the VAT, the value added tax. So when you pay for that movie ticket price, yeah, the gross revenues might be $10, let's say, for that ticket, but that VAT takes, I think it's about $1.30 right off the top. I think I've got some UK friends out there. I think the VAT, I want to say it's like 13% or something. I might be off on that, but I apologize if I am, but I'm off the cuff, off the top of my hat right now. So in any case, you have to factor that in. So now let's look at it. The net box office yield to Disney based on all these films. Raya and the Last Dragon, $225 million production and marketing. $62.5 million net yield to Disney from that. Total profit or loss, $162 million loss on that film. Cruella. Total yield to Disney after the box office take, after theaters and taxes keep their stuff, $110.6 million, $114 million loss on Cruella. Jungle Cruise, $109 million net to Disney, $190.9 million total loss to Disney from the box office. Black Widow, $183 million net to Disney, $116 million total loss to Disney. Now, I'm going to stop right here because this is where it gets important, because Black Widow is actually a figure that we know because Disney reported it. The final run for Black Widow, at least according to some of the Scarlett Johansson legal issues that happened, Disney released some of those figures in disclosure during that settlement, and they had reported somewhere in the neighborhood of about $125 million in revenues from Disney Plus for Black Widow. So if I take that $125 million and I slap it on there, Black Widow crossed the mark of break even and got into some profitability territory. I realize the settlement with ScarJo that was reported to be around $40 million obviously puts a dent into some of that. And that may be the case. But you're also assuming that the $40 million was all upfront in cash. Some of that, my opinion, is that Scarlett Johansson's relationship with Disney continues and that she will have future movie deals to the tune that would total up to around $40 million, including probably some upfront cash they gave her for this film. But again, that is pure speculation. I want to make that very clear. But just for argument's sake, we're going to say that Black Widow actually hit a break-even marker. Shang-Chi. Sorry, Shang-Chi lost money. It is the first movie to come in under the Marvel banner. As I told you back in September after the first weekend, I knocked the math out. I saw where this was going to going. It actually did finish a little bit better than I expected, no doubt. But it's still at a loss. Let's examine this one carefully, since people love to throw hell at me for this, and I'm sorry that math is a problem. But Shang-Chi, $250 million total all-in cost. Total global box office. Go ahead and put it at $433 million. Use the IMDb numbers if you want. Net yield to box office Disney, 206.6. Based on the numbers data. If I use the IMDb data, go ahead and add another $10 million to it. I don't care. Make it 216. It still lost at least $35 million, $43 million by the chart here using the data from the numbers. I'm sorry, folks. I mean, even if my math is off by 50%, it still had a loss of $20 million. Okay? Moving on. The Eternals, $300 million all in cost, $191 million total net yield to Disney for a loss of $108.456 million. Encanto, $250 million all-in costs, maybe $225, $99.83 million total net to Disney with a $150 million loss. Let's say that the marketing budgets on these were off again by 50%. All of these movies still show a loss. Every single one of them. Every single one. For a total loss on the year from the box office side of $886 million for Disney. Now, again, let's be generous, and let's say that between Raya and the Last Dragon, Cruella, Jungle Cruise, Black Widow, we know, was at $125 million. Let's say we throw those other three in there and give each of them another $125 million in Disney Plus revenues, which didn't happen, I promise you. You're still talking about a loss of almost $400 million on the year for Disney. And that's being extraordinarily generous. I think even if we factor in the Disney Plus Premier Access at a reasonable level of maybe saying 125 for Black Widow again, which we know, give between the other three movies another $200 million. You see where we're going with this. The losses still amount to almost $500 million. But again, remember that division reports differently. That gets reported under Disney Plus. That does not get reported under the theatrical distribution and licensing division for Disney. So again, here we are. Math is math, and math is a stubborn thing sometimes. So this is it. This is Disney's 2021. Hopefully things will be better in 2022. Because, here's the thing. Everybody wants to say, well, this happened because of pandemic. Well, the problem with that is Spider-Man came out. And we did a video on that recently showing that Spider-Man is on course when you even throw out the secondary and tertiary revenue streams from licensing out to places like Netflix, for example, or Showtime, or television down the line. Spider-Man's still going to clear over $200 million in profit once its theatrical run is complete. By the way, Spider-Man with a $200 million production budget had a $248 million global marketing from Sony. And that was in addition to the other couple $100 million that some of its marketing partners did around the globe. So you can kind of see how these numbers add up. So this is where we are. This is a very, very bad year for Disney. There's no doubt about it. This is what it is. This is not me inventing stuff. This is using data that is publicly available, using research data that is frankly publicly available from Deadline. It's very simple. But this is where we're at for Disney right now. Ain't looking pretty. But at least they get some tax write-offs. So hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully Disney has a better 2022 and they actually make some content that people really want to go see. People want to get out to the box office and go see. Because I think that is the common theme here. This isn't about fear of going back to the movie theater because of coof. It's about apathy. It's about people not wanting to go back to the movie theaters to waste time sitting and watching movies that they really don't care about. And nothing from Disney apparently was appealing enough this year to really turn a profit. Meanwhile, you've got Sony Pictures out there with things like Venom 2 and Spider-Man, obviously, that had better controlled production costs compared to what they did and turned a profit. And a lot of studios did. When you look at some of the horror pictures, like A Quiet Place Part 2, did exceptionally well. Even Godzilla vs. Kong, which came out when New York and Los Angeles were still locked down, that movie still managed to turn almost $500 million in global box office ticket sales, and it was on HBO Max day and date of release. If it hadn't been on HBO Max day and date and release, it probably would have done $1 billion in March when the lockdowns were still happening. So, any case, hope you enjoyed it. Hit that like and subscribe button. Share this video out. Do leave a comment before you check out. And until next time, take care.